Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lisa, will you let the roll call show that Councilmember Parisian will not be with us this evening? And I will also entertain a motion to excuse her.
I'll make the motion to excuse Councilmember Parisian.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. We'll move on to the approval of City Council minutes from August 12th, 2019.
I'll move the minutes.
I'll second.
Any discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. No bills this evening. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda.
Move the agenda.
I'll support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? At this time, we'll open the floor for public comment. Please remember to state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Jim Hamedi. I live at 1189 Horseshoe Drive. I'm here to personally announce to the citizens of South Lyon and the City Council my candidacy for City Council. I live in Trotters Point with my wife, Nahid, who many know as Nancy, and also serves on the Cable Commission, and our two children who both attend Centennial Middle School. My background for over 35 years is in what's currently referred to as information technology, which was previously called the PC industry, at which time, back then, it was considered a novelty in a world of dominant and expensive mainframe computers. I got into the PC industry because early on I saw the eventual proliferation and dominance of the PC. We all carry one these days in our pocket. Eventually I specialized as a network engineer, where I now work with products that actually tie the world together, literally. I work directly with our sales team to understand what hundreds on an annual basis of customers need and want, utilizing skills of analysis, innovation, flexibility, and compromise. Being in the PC world my entire career, I've always worked long hours and focused on finding and ensuring solutions that are innovative and ensure success. There is no failure. I've watched City Council meetings on Channel 19 and online and have been concerned, as many other people in our city, of the lack of focus and micromanagement, as well as the polarization which has also gripped our wonderful country, which is truly the greatest country in the world. If I may have just 2 more minutes. South Lyon has a wonderful and beautiful small town Americana atmosphere and culture. However, South Lyon has become a part of Metro Detroit and will be facing monumental challenges far beyond what has been seen before, which will require unity, vision, and flexibility. South Lyon needs to come together to be stronger in what lies ahead as Metro Detroit encroaches into South Lyon and beyond. We need to maintain a delicate balance of who we are while adapting to change through understanding and compromise to benefit our city. I want to bring my experience of focus, vision, understanding, compromise, innovation to help bring prosperity to South Lyon while keeping our city safe, friendly, and family-oriented. Thank you, and I appreciate the extra time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ryan Lair, 716 Grand Court. I'm here tonight to thank the public for bringing Mr. Greer home safe to his family. I was alerted to the situation the day of his disappearance, and I immediately got on Facebook and got the word out and practically had the whole community out looking for Mr. Greer. Our South Lyon Police Department deserves top honors for also rendering assistance. He was ultimately found and brought home safe and sound to his wife, and she was internally grateful and thanked the huge community for their support. This city is definitely the best community and city we could have. We have residents that are willing to answer the call and go above and beyond their daily lives to make sure that one of our own is safe. Regarding the circumstances, it's irrelevant. We all answered the call and came to help. So I want to thank the community for their absolute wonderful assistance in bringing this man home safe. Also, I'd like to thank Bob Donahue tonight for his job at the DDA. He has been doing a wonderful job downtown. The trash cans look beautiful. I stopped in and saw those. And Bob is just making this downtown look absolutely beyond gorgeous. The Memorial Foundation that he's planning is coming along great, and we still need donations. So anybody that's willing to help would be a huge help for this community, and it will look beautiful once it's done. Congratulations to Bob Donahue, our wonderful DDA director. Thank you.
Hi, Chase Turner. I'm actually from the Novi area, but I wanted to come here and see a lot of familiar faces and let you guys know I'll be running again in 2020 for state representative. It's an open seat this time, so we're gonna have a lot better time throughout the primary. And if you don't know anything about me, like I said, I'm from the Novi area. I work at a marketing company. We ran actually in 2018, and it was really close. We lost by a few hundred votes. Now, without the incumbency, I think that's going to be a big difference. And we all love South Lyon. We all love the 38th district, and we want to make our cities as good as we can possibly make it. Leaving things better than we found it, giving a better future for our kids. And I couldn't be more excited to put the work boots on and go out there and do it. And we're going to knock on doors throughout the campaign. We're going to fundraise. We're going to do everything. I know it's early, but sorry, I'm a little bit too tall for this, so we're going to grab this out here. You go to my website, chaseturner.org. You can check us out on Facebook. We're going to be pounding the pavement. We knocked on 6,600 doors last year. We'll be doing it again. And I'll be here after if anyone wants to stick around, talk with me. I see I've got 45 more seconds left, so we might as well use it. But the whole story is we just want common sense solutions. We want to make things better. We all want the roads to be better. We want more affordable auto insurance. We want to just do the things to give a better future to our kids and to our state. So thank you guys, and reach out to me on Facebook. Reach out to me on Instagram, social media, email. Vote Chase Turner at Outlook.com and chaseturner.org. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chase.
Hi, my name is Lisa Dilk. I live at 634 Covington Street. Some of you may know I'm also running for city council. I didn't think I was going to get up and talk, but there is one thing that I just wanted to address, and it's kind of the negativity in some of the campaigning. And I just
Can you turn the mic
turn
towards
this
us?
way? And I wanted to ask if maybe we could have a call for civility in our elections. I've already heard some kind of negative things going around, people turning each other in for disclaimers not being on their signs and trying to get on each other's Facebook pages, things like that. It just seems unnecessary, almost childish. And, I just wanted to say, I've been wanting to do this for a long time. The community has been really great to me and my kids when their father was sent overseas several times when they were growing up. And I really have always wanted to give back, and I'm really excited about it. So I was a little dismayed about some of the negativity, and I'm really hoping that we can all just come together and kind of end that. Candidates, city council, everybody, supporters, and that kind of thing. I think that we see enough of that on the state and federal level, and sometimes I think People think I'm just being naive or Pollyanna or whatever, but, I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to, since I've been doing this and even before, people who've lived here all their lives, people who just moved here, seniors, young people, and everybody has said, every single person has said, I hope if you get in, you can bring some more positivity back to the city government. And I think that we should all, listen to that a little bit. I think people are just kind of tired of it. We see it every day. And, we're all neighbors, and we should just treat each other like neighbors. And, I've met a lot of people. I think, of course I'd like to win. Nobody goes into this thinking that they hope they lose. But I've met a ton of people that are running for city council, and I think that they're all really great. And if I lose, then that means other great people will be on city council, and I just want us to keep that in mind. And I just really want to show the town that we can do better, we can be better, and we can be respectful in how we handle our elections. So that's all I want. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will close public comment and move on to the discussion of the downtown. Mr. Donahue.
Yes. I'll make it brief. You've got your report from Paul. Cool Yule's progressing nicely. Need to finalize some details. Be coming before council on September 10th with some final details for the road closures. Business survey is on schedule. It will be going out week of September 1, so we're all set with that. The past 2 weeks, we've been looking at discussion and having discussion on amendments with our planning consultant. Working with the Cultural Arts Commission and the DDA, continuing to promote the arts and culture. So we're looking at amendments to the zoning ordinance to allow murals, both downtown and throughout the whole community. So Paul and I met with our planning consultant, and we've looked at other communities, and we're going to move that forward, hopefully in the next 2 months. And we have people that are ready to go. That's all I have, unless you have questions.
Councilmember Kennedy, go ahead.
So Bob, just to confirm, I had been advised that the business owners will be notified of the business survey through a letter that's sent to them using the postal service initially, right?
Yes.
Which will direct them to a website where they can complete the survey.
Correct.
But just so that the business owners are aware that that's going to be the initial point of contact, advising them how to get to that survey and obviously complete it so that
Yes.
you can get all the feedback from everybody. So watch for the letter in the mail, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kurtzwell, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I noticed that there was a stop order taped on Draft Street. What's going on there? What happened there?
I believe the building department saw activity, went in, and felt that there was sufficient work being done that was not, any permits were not applied for at City Hall. I had discussions with the owner, with the owner's representative who will manage, who expects to manage the new operation. I informed him that he had to go to City Hall for the permits. He said he would. Apparently he didn't listen all that well and started to do the work without going for permits. So I don't know the detail. I know that they saw work underway, and that's why they hit the red tag. So he hasn't called me back. I know that people in the community have approached me and said that he intended to call me, but I told him he should call the building department, not really me, or the city manager, because I'm out of it. I advised him up front when he asked to meet with me. We talked about the sign ordinance, the need for a permit there, and then need to work with the building department. So I guess he chose to ignore that advice.
Well, I do want to let you know that I did check the public records and did not see a transfer of ownership of the property. So I don't think it's been sold. But if it's the same continuation of the group, whatever the group is, whatever the restaurateur group is, obviously there's somewhat of an opinion that the laws don't apply to them, they just apply to everybody else. And that was the problem when they ran the restaurant, is that the health department laws didn't apply to them. You know, they applied to everybody else that had to comply. And now you have an individual who has attempted to go into the building and not pull a permit like everybody else in this town has to do. I agree with you. I hope they see the light and understand that the laws are there for everybody, you know, whether it's the building department or anything else you do. They apply to everybody equally. So I'm sorry to see this happen because I think it's just another disdain that people have with respect to this restaurateur group. So I wish them success and luck as they try to journey with a new business in town. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kimball, go ahead.
Well, they have had a hiatus for a prolonged period of time, so what are their official obligations? I don't know what they owe us, save for the permits and things, if there's any amendments to what the physical building is. We have standards for the exteriors and that, so, I mean, is there deficient paint where they're going to need to end up dialing up the exterior? I know that there's health department things, but that really doesn't directly impact us, but do we get notice that they've complied with all the health department issues that would be necessary?
I don't know about notice from the health department.
Simply the fact they have a license that's legitimate?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
okay.
They won't be able to, the health department, I know, because I was in contact with them before, informed me that whenever it would reopen after the 12 months, that the health department do a complete inspection.
Which should give people some solace. I mean, then they're compliant to everything right out of the gates. If they turn things around, I think this community will embrace them.
Sure, and I don't want to speak for the building department, but I know that they had sufficient reason. I know that the fire marshal also went in with the building department and saw some items that he felt didn't meet code or the fire code.
Which are
So
clearly
they're
important
aware
issues.
of what they
Yeah.
need to fix. Now they need to submit the permits. But other than that, I don't know the details of what the building
Okay.
department's doing.
So the condition of the exterior isn't something that we're really concerned about at this time?
Actually, I talked to the building department about that. It does not meet the maintenance code,
That's kind of
and
what
that
I
is
was
an item.
figuring. Yeah.
It is an item.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else with anything for Mr. Donahue tonight? All right, thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
We will move on to new business number 1, Parks and Recreation Communication Board.
Mayor, we have received a request from the Parks and Recreation Committee to purchase a communication board for McCaddy Park. I've attached for you the copy of what the communication board looks like. It's in the same style that is at the Early Childhood Center in South Lyon. They plan to use existing funds from the Lions Club, which total right now is $19,622. That does also include the $3,441 of what's been deposited for the acquisition of the wheelchair swing. They're also going to brief you tonight a little bit on the progress of the wheelchair swing. We have included the materials that shows a depiction of the board and where they're looking at placing it within the park. And the possible course of action tonight is approve or not approve the purchase of the installation of the communication board from McCaddy Park from Image 360 in the amount of $675. And my recommendation is to approve that purchase. There is representatives from the Parks and Rec Committee here that will talk with you about a couple of those items this evening.
Hi.
Hello.
So I guess I'll talk about the core communication board. It would mirror the board that's already at ECC. We worked with Michael Lloyd on it, and the pictures are something that all the children use at that school. So it would be very similar. We've only changed 4 squares out, and the rest of the squares will be exactly the same, so they'll know the same position and everything, and hopefully it'll help nonverbal and autistic kids have another chance to communicate.
And just for the record, could you just state your name, too?
Jody Van Dynen.
Thank you. Councilmember Kimball, go ahead.
I was kind of curious, is there any standardization of the way these things are set up so that anybody that's using them has an understanding of the pattern of
Yeah, so
where the icons are?
The company that makes the little squares each picture is like a nationwide company. Not every school or whatever has to use it, but it's one of the more commonly accepted. It is the one that ECC uses. So these pictures are all fairly known to them. And like I said, we're keeping the same position. As for the sign, it would be only like 6 inches off the ground. So, like a 3 or 4-year-old or whatever would still be able to reach and point. And we want to have it double-sided, so it'll be this on one side, this on the other side. So 2 kids could use it at the same time as well if needed.
Well, I think that's actually very valuable if that's a pretty commonly used language, because, you don't want to have a new glossary every time they go to a different
Right,
park,
yep.
so.
This was, the pictures were like Oakland Schools uses them as well, so they helped us out with this, yeah.
Terrific, thank you.
Councilmember Kennedy, go ahead.
I may have missed it.
Sure.
But the drawing shows the location for the wheelchair swing and the existing swings in the park. Whereabouts is this going to be
So
located?
this I need to still get with Ron to figure out spacing, because we want to put it in with the playground equipment, so when the kids are playing, they can say I want to go to the slide, or I need to go to the bathroom, so they don't have to come all the way over to a parent to communicate or whatever like that. So we want to put it in there, but because the spacing of the spinners, you need so many feet in between. I haven't gotten with Ron yet to do that, but it will be in the playground area.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does that climbing structure have anything that, a surface that would lend itself to this? Because that seems like where most of the really little people.
Yeah, I'm hoping to put it near the where the spinners are now, because that's usually where they are, and then there is that little kids equipment as well. But it would be for all ages as well, because it's nonverbal, so that can go,
Sure.
So my hope is to get it in pretty close to where the spinners are, because they seem to have enough open area there, and it's close enough to the benches, so if a mom or dad was sitting, they could still see that their kid was coming and meet them at the board. That's my hope, but again, I have to get with Ron about.
Sure.
I didn't know the exact spacing of how many open area you have to leave.
Councilmember Walton?
Thank you. I think this is a wonderful idea. You guys are always finding ways to improve our park in such phenomenal ways, so.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about it, and I'm really excited about the wheelchair swing. I know several years ago we asked for one, and so I'm glad that we were able to find
Yes,
that
our
funding.
goal is to take the park more inclusive, so this is just hopefully the beginning of that. It's our
Phenomenal.
big
We
goal.
have such a wonderful park, and you guys do, and not just McCady Park, all the parks. You guys do a
Thank
wonderful
you.
job.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kennedy?
I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to approve the purchase and installation of the communication board for McCady Park Image 360 in the amount of $675 from account number 101-690-978.
I'll support.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We have a motion by Councilmember Kennedy, supported by Councilmember Walton, to approve the purchase and installation of the communication board for McCady Park Image 360 in the amount of $675 from account 101-690-978. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Hold on, Chief. She's got one more item she's going to talk about.
The important one.
Good evening. My name is Erica Wilson, and I am the chairperson for the Parks and Rec Commission. And I'm here to answer any questions you have about the wheelchair swing.
Councilmember Walton, go ahead.
Erica, do we know when it's going to be put in?
Well, we're working through this process, and after tonight, we're going to move forward with the bidding process for the swing, and then we'll have a better idea for funds and where we stand with those funds.
Okay. Wonderful.
Councilmember Kurtzwell, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do want to say that I have to agree with Councilwoman Walton that this wheelchair swing is long overdue. I have a friend that years ago had a child that was in a wheelchair, and we went over to McCady Park, and it was very difficult to sit there with her child in a wheelchair while that child sat there and watched every other kid on the swings. And so children who have physical disabilities or physical needs, they know in some aspects that they are physically limited. They understand that. But what they don't understand is why can't they enjoy life like somebody else? So this wheelchair is very, very important to this community. It's important to me. It's important to a lot of people. And I can't urge you enough to get that installed tomorrow. I know tomorrow's not
Right.
to be, but you need to remember, for every day that you delay putting in that wheelchair swing, there is a day that a mother with a child in a wheelchair is not able to take that child to the park to enjoy like other mothers are able to. So I urge with some immediacy to move as quickly as you can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kennedy, go ahead.
And I think as has been discussed here, this could be a gateway installation.
Yes.
That lends itself to other installations down the road, such as, picnic tables where, it's accessible for a wheelchair to easily wheel up to the picnic table to partake with the rest of the family, as opposed to trying to go off-roading to get to that picnic table and
Yes.
so forth. So it's a good start.
Yeah, it is. We're looking forward to making our parks more inclusive.
Yeah. And that was a good point. I mean, the thing that you actually have it located near the other swing. So this is the area for all the kids that want to swing, not just for those with certain disabilities, et cetera. So that's an important part of where it is located.
Yeah, that was our intent, and we're hoping that it does, that area does lend for the clearance that we need for the swing, and that it can be prepared as such, so we can keep it there.
That's great. Thanks.
Councilmember Richards, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Erica, is this considered phase one, or is this part of a larger phase, okay, or all of the phase for improving playground equipment?
Well, currently, we're just looking this as an entity in itself, because this is being raised, it's using city funds, it's being raised, money's being raised privately for it as well. So to say that it's like a phase one, I wouldn't exactly say. I think Council Member Kennedy said it good. It is a gateway installation for
I
us.
see, okay.
Councilmember Kivel, go ahead.
I'm assuming that everything that you guys are reviewing is being looked at in these eyes, where I know that you don't end up having every picnic table that has the ability to host a child in a wheelchair and that, but certainly there are standards. If you have 10 picnic tables, one of them should be, whatever the ratio is. So I'm hoping that everything that we're reviewing in the future is keeping that in the light, so.
And we are consulting with families that do have family members that have disabilities. So we're getting their input as well, because some of us without that experience, we don't know.
Oh, certainly,
Yeah,
right.
so
They
we're
have the best
working with them.
hands-on understanding, sure.
That's great.
Yeah, good deal. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have anything?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to bring up that we'll be bringing this back before council after we successfully complete the bidding process. I'll be working with the committee to look at the items that we're actually going to be bidding on, sending that out, and then coming back for approval at a later date.
Great. Thanks, Paul.
Wonderful.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Keep up the great
Erica.
work.
Thank you for everything.
We're going to move on to new business number 2, emergency purchase of extraction equipment, Jaws of Life. Extraction equipment? Yeah, I don't know if that's,
Extrication.
yeah, thank you.
Patient. Thank you. First off, I need to apologize. For the last 2 weeks, I have been working on this extremely hard, a lot of hours, multiple people, and I've made mistakes. Councilman Kursoff caught them. I apologize. On this agenda item, the suggested motion should not be what it says. And when we get to the next one, if need be, I'll discuss that mistake. Quick history for the listening audience. August 9th, Southline Fire Department was dispatched to a reported rollover accident. The patient ended up being stuck in the vehicle. We were able to get the patient out, but then the equipment quit. And it was catastrophic. It completely broke. I had, first idea was we'll just get a new motor. Took it to a couple different small engine repairs and they wouldn't touch it. It's a very specialized piece of equipment and they were nervous due to the shaft that comes out of the motor. Ms. Kimball gave me an idea to try eBay. So I tried eBay and I couldn't find exactly what I what we need. It was about $4,000 on eBay, but it was not what we used. Another idea we came up with was to do some of the Michigan auction government websites. I couldn't find anything close. The problem we're having is it's an older unit. It's very old. It was due for replacement in the 2021 or 2022 budget. I went then to the manufacturer, and they've pulled out of Michigan. So getting that repaired was not doable. So then I started reaching out to a couple of the vendors, and that's where you'll see where I got this wonderful news that a friend of mine retired, who now works for Apollo, says we've got a great deal on a demo set. It's full warranty. I know that came up. So I started spending time taking some of my firefighters to different departments that had it to see if we liked it. I had tried to get our hands on all of them. I tried to get as many as 5 bids, but I was unsuccessful. I only could get 3. And that's where we stand today. Now, I know 2 weeks ago we said we thought it would be about $20,000. Well, that was for 2 pieces. I thought due to the cost savings for the citizens, this is a complete set, super savings, that's why I decided with Paul, we thought that this would probably be the best option for the city. I ran some numbers. I did a risk analysis of the city. So 2018, we had 22 car accidents that we were called to. Up to date this year, we've had 17. We also had 2 industrial accidents in 2018. Mm-hmm. The tool is not just for car accidents, it's also the industrial aspect. There's 3 or 4 manufacturing facilities here that I feel this could be used. Mm-hmm. We like the units because they're lighter, they're environmentally friendly, and I think it just fits our needs, and that's why I'm recommending it. I really did. I apologize. I made the mistake. I don't know how I got through. Even my editors looked at it, and we still got through us. So I really apologize. Questions? Love to answer.
Councilmember Kivel, and then over to Kennedy.
I was curious, did we have a RAM before?
Yes, it's part of the same tool that's broken.
Yeah, okay.
The thought process was, when I first thought that we could probably wait till next year's budget to purchase it, but then someone said, we used one of these at one of the manufacturing before.
I could see
and
that
I thought,
being, yeah, we need to be
really
equipped
want
for
to be
everything.
without and have to either rely on a neighboring department, and then it was part of this package deal. Now, we could have a la carte it, but the savings that Apollo gave us to take this full warranted set, I thought, well, since we're in it now.
I think it makes much more sense to be prepared for any eventuality. So I think
we just
that
have,
was the way to go.
I
just
we
didn't
don't
know if
have
we
highway.
had an old one.
We know that, but we do have enough industrial. We do have Pontiac Trail, 10 mile, 9 mile, 11 mile, that I think this is something we need. It's not a toy, it's a tool. And it's something I believe we should carry.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Kennedy, you had something?
I did. And Rob, you and I have already discussed the issue a little bit, but first I commend you for actually projecting the useful life that you had left in that piece of equipment, that it was going to be in the 2021-22 fiscal year. It's just unfortunate sometimes the equipment determines when it's going to move it forward. So that's what took place at this particular time. I like the fact that you found a unit, obviously saving the city about $5,500, and it comes with the same warranty, and that you've also done the due diligence with other departments and looking at their experience with that set of tools. So I appreciate the background effort you went through to come up with this recommendation.
Councilmember Kurtzwell?
I think what I was impressed, and I think that's why I spent the time on it, looking at your motions. And by the way, they're minor errors, so it's not that big a deal.
I do apologize. I really do.
Don't worry about it.
I try to be sharper, and I missed it.
You're extremely sharp. That's why we have you here, affiliated with our city. I think what's important for the public to understand is that this, and you hit the nail on the head, is that this is just not a tool that is used for rollover accidents, for getting somebody out of a car, is that I think we need to understand and appreciate your vision in terms of being all-encompassing with respect to the industry that we do have in the city. So the price is a little expensive, but you know what? It's for the safety of all of those who drive our roads and who also conduct business and employment here in the city. So I want to thank you for, because I was going to bring that up tonight, is that I think you need to expand on the jaws of life, because I think most people associate it solely with just cars that turn over, that it has more of an industrial application than just the vehicular. So thank you, Chief.
It's interesting, when I did a risk analysis, I found in the history of the South Lyon, speaking of park and rec, there was a child that head got stuck in an older style play structure, and they ended up using it to separate the bars, and I thought that was interesting, but so that's why.
Councilmember Richards, did you have something?
Yeah, Chief Vogel, do we get some amount of a limited warranty with this demo model?
Yes, so they will honor 2 years parts and labor, an additional 8 years parts. So 10 years.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's.
Councilmember Walton?
You know, I also want to commend you for your ability to think outside the box and go so far into looking at eBay, talking to
I tried, yeah.
Was it Mrs. Kibble or
Yeah.
Mr. Kibble? I think you said
Last
Mrs.
council meeting,
Kibble.
she called me afterwards. She said, thought about eBay.
I mean, it's fantastic that you took the time to research all these different avenues and find the best way for being financially responsible for our city, and that's wonderful. And it's also interesting that you found that we used them on the child there.
Yeah.
Again, we always think outside the box in this city, so I appreciate that.
Councilmember Kennedy?
I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to approve the purchase of the Hearst demo extrication tools from Paula Fire Equipment Company for $26,500.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. On to new business number 3, budget amendment, capital equipment fund.
So again, another error. So this one was new to me, and I reached out to the current bookkeeper, Patricia, and the past bookkeeper, and they set me straight. The way that should have read, thank you, Maggie, was it should have said account 101.335.978.
978.
So I say it right, I'm asking some money to come out of the general fund to go into my line item, 978 capital equipment, to pay for the equipment that you just all approved. This one was really new to me, and this one I got a lot of help from. I just forgot to type in the 101. So.
Councilmember Kurtzwell, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a real stickler on the budget, as you know.
And I'm learning, I promise you.
No, but that's okay, because we're all learning. I mean, it's a process where everybody learns. I learn all the time regarding the budget. I read a lot of materials on municipality financing, and I'm attending a seminar in October on municipality financing. So you just learn, and what you do is you pass off that knowledge. For me, as a stickler for the budget, I like to go to the budget, and I like to look at that line item to see exactly where that is coming from. I don't care if we have to do a budget amendment, but I want to be able to know that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And for me, that was a capital equipment purchase. It wasn't documented in the memo. I wanted to see it as a capital equipment purchase. Why is that important? Because as we go forward in terms of projecting for year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, we can see a trend as to whether or not you're using your capital equipment fund or whether you need more in that fund. So as a budgeter, it's difficult to forecast or estimate financial needs of a department if we don't accurately document that information in the budget. So the long answer is it helps to have the details presented in the memo. Because what does Maggie do with that information? I go home, I make a note in my budget, approved on such and such a night, refer to the meeting, and I put it in the actual tab. So to me, it's important. I take this budget very, very seriously. So, but you're doing a great job.
It did clear up the muddy waters for me on the details.
That's
on
okay.
This one.
That's okay. We're all learning.
I had a great chance to sit with a couple different people and explain to me exactly how they should have read.
Municipal finance is not easy for anybody. And when somebody gets hired into the city, I don't think that people are experts on municipal finance. I think when people come onto city council, they're not experts on municipal finance. You learn it over time, you teach yourself, you ask questions. I mean, it's a process. So I think you're fabulous. You took the initiative to find the right answer, and that's why you're here with our city and you have the credentials that you do, because you take the initiative. And we all learned. So thank you. Thank you for paying attention to the budget.
Councilmember Kennedy, go ahead.
I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to approve the budget amendment and the correction to the account 101.335.978 as described by Chief Vogel.
Sorry. I'll support.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Motion
Thanks,
passes.
Rob.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
New business number 4 this evening, new IT company.
Mr. Mayor, research has been done in the last several months regarding preparation of securing a new IT company that provided a more reliable and responsive service to our growing city at a reasonable price. 5 companies were contacted. 3 of the 5 IT companies gave quotes for providing services to the entire city: Visicom, Logicalis, and IT Right. IT Right services over 500 municipalities and came in significantly lower per year with an unlimited repair and troubleshooting for our computer needs. I've attached information regarding cost and benefit Excel spreadsheet, a company comparison document, contracts with Visicom and IT Right, and the possible course of action this evening is approve or not approve the changeover to a new IT company. My recommendation is to approve the new agreement with the IT Right for all city technological services. Brianne from the police department is here. She assisted in the major process of this and securing all the information, and is happy to answer questions. Myself and the police chief were involved, and we can hopefully, if you have any questions, we can provide the answers.
Councilmember Kibble.
Right out of the gates, I'd like to ask a question about the contract. Your agenda note speaks to the idea that there's a bullet point making a reference to the savings of $8,000 if we purchase the servers in the first year. The contract specifically states that a new server would end up being considered outside of the scope of the contract. So I'd like to have an understanding that what our understanding is the actual circumstance, that we will save the $8,000.
So what they were talking about with that was that we would still have to pay for the hardware of the server, but if we purchased that server in the first year of that contract, we would not have to pay for labor.
The labor
And
aspect,
the labor
okay.
is the biggest portion, that Visicom
Perfect.
also quoted us.
Okay.
So.
That's very helpful. The rest of it I'm enjoying. It is more pricey than what we had, but having a cheaper version that doesn't actually accomplish everything that you're looking for is not a value. So this is obviously in our best interest to move to something that'll provide the services that we need when we need them. So I'm really grateful that you guys had reached out and researched this as deeply as you had. So thank you very much.
And the contract amount that you see at the bottom comes out of 6 different departments, potentially numerous other accounts for IT services for the contracts. And we also purchase computers, which are another 6 departments that account. So these are all processed and determined based upon ratios, based upon use. And we'll be getting better ratios based upon their analysis of our computer system, because we are looking at purchasing new mainframes for the city, for police department, as well as for City Hall. We're looking at interconnectivity. We've met with some communication companies over the last several weeks to talk about some of those needs and bringing them on board, going through a process of ending a contract with a 90-day out that we have with the current contract we have with the IT company, and then moving forward with this, and then getting a lot of support and determining what our needs are going to be over the next several months.
Is storage and safety high considerations in this whole thing?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Security and storage, okay.
That's their number one thing. Their IT right specifically is vetted through Michigan State Police.
I had seen that, and I
for
was heartened by that, yeah.
Yeah, for their encryption certificates, all of that stuff. They don't just send their stuff to the cloud.
I have to admit, I was surprised to see that we've been having such a problem with them getting the certs from the existing company, so, yeah, that's troubling.
And the issue with the Michigan State Police necessitated this quick moving of this process. And with the Brianne's assistant, we were able to put this together fairly quickly, as well as in obviously great detail.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Richards, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to say, I hope we're making the right decision on this, and I think we are. The technical aspects of what you do and provide is beyond a good many of us, okay? But I'm in here enough, okay, and involved with things in all the departments that I know that they've got some real problems with copying, communicating, sending messages, emails, back and forth, inter-office communication, and infrastructure, okay? And anything we can come up with that'll solve this problem, we need it now, that's for sure, not 3 years from now, we need it now. And plus these other guys that we had for 3 years, they said right here that we refused to service the new hardware unless it was purchased through them, okay? That turns me off when they say something like that in their quote. That's it, thank you.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Again, I appreciate everybody's efforts on putting the package together, doing the cost-benefit analysis, and looking at what it's really going to cost when you start looking at the cost of service calls and everything, because that's kind of where the real contact comes in, when somebody has a problem and how reliable that service is going to be, how quickly it's going to be provided, and how likely it's going to address the issue that initiated that call. So I'm glad that we've taken the step to move in this direction. And I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to approve the new agreement and the contract with IT Right for all city technological services in the amount of $35,500 per year, contingent upon city attorney review and approval of the proposed IT Right contract.
I'll support. I did want to ask a question, though. Paul, you had made a reference to 90 days on Visicom's.
Yeah, that's within the current contract that we have, so we would be notifying them after this meeting regarding that. We've already been having a lot of discussions with them about what they can and cannot provide us.
Does that give IT Right any benefit of being able to ramp up and get prepared to?
Yes, Brianne has secured that in the conversations that we've had with them, and I think it's extremely important to recognize that Brianne spent a great deal of time on this, and commend her work on working with all our departments and getting all our needs and everything that we need to make this happen.
All right, well, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, Brian. New business number 5 this evening, Michigan Seamless Tool presentation.
Hi, good evening. My name is Anne Marie Sanford. I'm an attorney at Pepper Hamilton, and I'm representing Michigan Seamless Tube. Before I start, I think we all know we're here. Michigan Seamless Tube is seeking a limited groundwater use ordinance. Let me introduce some of the people that are here, because I'm sure you're going to have some questions, and then you'll know who's here. So, Matt Bell is here from Michigan Seamless Tube. Brad Hoare is Michigan Seamless Tube's environmental consultant from AECOM. And then we also have 3 people here from formerly MDEQ, but it's Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, or EAGLE. So we have John McCabe, Joe Rogers, and Rich Comforti. And then my colleague, Todd Fracassi, is also here. So I think it's important. I think everyone knows Michigan Seamless Tube. It's been here in the community for nearly 100 years. But I wanted to give you some background on the company that's here now today owning and operating the facility. So And I'll refer to it as MST. It's Michigan Seamless Tube LLC is the current company. So this property has been used since 1924 for the manufacture of steel tubing. So as I said, nearly 100 years. In January of 2002, the owner of the steel mill, they stopped operating the facility and they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Some of you might know the facility was put on hot idle. The facility was going to close. In October of 2002, the current owner, as I said, Michigan Seamless Tube LLC, or MST, purchased the property and certain steel-related assets out of bankruptcy, and they began operating in November of 2002. So when MST acquired the property, the business was regulated under a federal statute called the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, or RCRA. Okay, I'm an environmental lawyer, so I speak in acronyms, and please ask questions if you have questions. But if you are a RCRA facility, that regulates facilities that generate, treat, or store hazardous substances. Once you're a RCRA facility, you're always a RCRA facility. Okay, and you can't discharge that liability in bankruptcy. So whoever owns the property has responsibility for what I'm going to call RCRA areas. Okay, so when Michigan Seamless Tube purchased the property and the assets, they negotiated with Eagle, and they negotiated an agreement regarding these RCRA areas, including a payment schedule and a spending cap and a compliance schedule, and to give the company some certainty in the steps that would be needed to address the corrective action requirements at the property under the statute RCRA. And the agreement was a fundamental basis upon which MST decided to purchase the property and the business. So MST and Eagle signed an agreement called a Corrective Action Consent Order, CACO. Okay, more acronyms, sorry. And that was signed in 2004. So MST has been working with Eagle, with the state, since 2004 to investigate and properly address the RCRA areas that were caused by the historical operations prior to MST purchasing the facility. Okay, so what we are addressing is historical contamination that was there prior to MST purchasing the property and the assets. So environmental impacts from one of the RCRA areas is the reason that we're here today, and that is the reason that MST is requesting this groundwater use ordinance. Now, there's another regulatory program in Michigan. So prior to acquiring the property, MST also investigated other areas that are not governed under RCRA, and they were looking for any other potential presence of additional contaminants. So they did what's called a baseline environmental assessment. So under Michigan law, which is Part 201 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, a purchaser can conduct an investigation called a baseline environmental assessment, or a BEA, and the purchaser will not be liable for the impacts existing at the time of acquisition if all the requirements of the law are met. Okay? So in 2002, MST completed their BEA that identified other impacts at the property that weren't RCRA areas. MST notified Eagle regarding the results of the BEA, and under Michigan law, MST is not liable for those impacts. So this means that MST is not required to clean up those areas, but Michigan law requires that MST exercise what's called due care for those areas. So MST has to take actions to ensure that the contamination doesn't cause unacceptable exposures and that it's not exacerbated or worsened. So, since 2004, MST has been working under the supervision and approval of Eagle to investigate the RCRA areas at the property under this CACO. Work under the CACO was prioritized based on input from Eagle. To date, MST has paid over $2 million into a CACO trust fund that they've used to fund the work at the property. So as will be discussed in more detail by MST's environmental consultant, MST has been investigating these historical RCRA areas. MST identified that there were certain metals present in the groundwater that have migrated past the southern boundary of the MST property in concentrations that are above the Michigan drinking water standards. Now, based on years of sampling data since 2004, MST has determined that this plume is stable. There are no groundwater wells in the area of this plume, and this area is served by municipal water. To further guard against any unacceptable exposures by ensuring that no one drinks this water, MST, in consultation with Eagle, proposed to prohibit the use of groundwater at the affected parcels. The groundwater use ordinance would prevent use of this groundwater. Okay? So now I'm wondering if you could maybe pass out the maps. We have a map here, but we've also made copies for you to see. There are 8 parcels that are immediately south of the MST facility. The majority of those parcels are city-owned parcels. Okay? And as I said, and these parcels are already served by municipal water, so there's no exposure to the impacted groundwater at this time. Okay? This is to provide further protection, just to ensure that no one puts in a well, even though they already have city water. Okay? Brad? Do you want to come there?
Do you want me to stand or?
There's a microphone there if you're comfortable there.
Sure. Hello, Brad Hoare with AECom.
Can I ask a question here before we get too far adrift? Okay, so you said a lot of the property is city property. How much of it is privately owned?
Parcels or property that are identified on that figure are 7 and 8. All the rest are city-owned parcels. That includes the 4 in line, that's the rails to trails. Property 5, which is the city's wastewater treatment plant or the clean water plant. And property 6, which is the Department of Public Works.
Okay. So essentially that's that boat storage location?
Correct.
Yes, okay.
Yep, that's properties, 7 and 8.
Thank you. And you said this was from 2004. It has not moved?
So
You said it was stabilized, so...
yes, MST began investigating these areas in consultation and approval with the state of Michigan. And we've determined after 15 years that the plume is stable.
You've outlined the outside perimeter, and that hasn't drifted?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So kind of tacking on what Ann Maria said, the parcels that are included in this ordinance were based on years of environmental investigation. And what we found was that we do have constituents. The constituents that are affecting this ordinance are metals, in particular iron, manganese, and molybdenum. All of those are above the drinking water criteria set forth by the state of Michigan. All of those constituents are also naturally occurring in groundwater, especially in this region of South Lyon. Iron and manganese are exceedingly high. We've noticed that during our years of investigation and sampling, monitoring wells across the area, that we have very high metal concentrations. But in particular, south of the MST facility, and you can see it at the north part of that figure there, groundwater flow in that area is generally to the west and has a southerly component to that. So north on this figure is straight up. So groundwater flow regionally is to the west, but this area is affected by Yerkes Drain, if you're familiar with that. That cuts across properties from east to west, 8, 7, and then it goes across the DPW property and then the city treatment plant. So the surface water does have an effect on groundwater flow. So that kind of pulls the groundwater towards it. That's where we get that southerly component of groundwater flow. That is the basis of these parcels. Groundwater flow to the south of Yerkes Drain obviously would then be opposite. It would be kind of to the northwest of that. Between the groundwater flow that we've measured over the last 15 years of investigation, monitoring well data from sampling the monitoring wells across the area, we know that that metals plume is stable. There are fluctuations as naturally occurring materials in the ground, the soils and things like that leach off metals, but we've determined it to be stable in that area. Like Anne Marie said, this is within the city property, so there are no wells. It's all connected to municipal water, so. The source of the metals. So like I said, a lot of the metals are naturally occurring. But the component of metals from MST were from those historical waste management units through their operations from the previous owner. That's where the other portion of those metals came from. One thing to add, and I think you mentioned this, Anne Marie, was that all of the work that has been done at the site here has been approved, reviewed, and supported by Eagle. They've kind of helped us guide the investigation, MST, through those years of investigation. So.
Can I just ask one more
Any other question? Yeah.
Isn't molybdenum the one that would be the most concerning health-wise?
Yes and no. The state criteria are based on toxicological research. So each metal has its own criteria level, especially for drinking water. So depending on the toxicity of that metal for ingestion is that number's based on. And they're not all the same. And we're looking at parts per million range, micrograms per liter.
Right, but those are the other two are naturally occurring in the area, and molybdenum isn't. So
not as much.
Yeah.
Yep.
You've introduced that.
And I think it's also important to point out that since Michigan Seamless Tube, the current owner acquired the property, they don't dispose of materials on site. So they're not the source of what we're finding now. This was all historical. John?
Just a quick question, if I could. What's the depth on the plume?
How deep?
How deep is the plume?
Yep.
Across the area, we have monitoring wells ranging from the water table, which is 10 to 15 feet below the ground surface, all the way to the bottom of the aquifer, which is what we've seen 100 to 120 feet below ground surface. We found metals the full depth of the aquifer. Whether or not those are naturally occurring or not, it's hard to decipher which is which on those.
So let me just make sure I understand this. I was under the impression this is just a groundwater situation, that you didn't want anybody in the area putting in an irrigation well and disrupting that plume, and now you're telling me it touches the aquifer from which we draw drinking water for the city?
No.
Okay.
There's a number of
So
layers.
as part of the investigation, a couple of things. The city well is upgradient of the Michigan Seamless Tube site.
Okay.
Michigan Seamless Tube, as part of the investigations, sampled upgradient, sampled the city well. They did pump tests when the city well was pumping to ensure that, at full pumping, it wouldn't change, pull the impacts.
Doesn't draw it in or anything, right?
No. And, as I said earlier, the work that's been done was not only under the approval of the state, but it was at the state's direction because the state's job is to ensure that there are no unacceptable exposures. And so they directed and they prioritized the work. So that work on the city's well was done very, very early on.
How many monitoring wells are there surrounding the perimeter of the plume?
On the whole site, we have...
On the magnitude of 70 to 80 watt monitoring
Yeah.
wells? Okay. And how often are they monitored? I mean, what's the frequency of checking the readings and so forth, just out of curiosity?
What has been done in the past is every year. So we're moving into the phase where we're doing site-wide monitoring, where we sample all the monitoring wells.
And you track the results so they're plotted to see if whether or not we have an increase or a
Yep.
decrease?
Yep.
And all that information is provided to the state.
Okay. Is the city
The-
copied in that? Are
The
they aware?
information, under the CAECO, MST is required to put all final reports into a local depository, so it's at the city library.
Okay. Thanks.
Of those 70 or 80 monitoring stations, how many of them are on MST's property?
Nearly all of them.
Nearly.
I mean, there are off-site wells. There's a lot of
Yeah.
on-site. But
That was my concern.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about property that you guys don't have control of,
Oh, no.
I'd like to have a better understanding that we have ample monitoring taking place in those locations.
So as part of the site investigation, the state will require that you find the end of the plume, if you will. And so that's what we've been required to do. And so there are monitoring wells on the city property, on the DPW, that the city has provided access for. So we have clean wells that are, downgrading of the plume. So not only do we have wells upgradient, and in the plume, we have wells downgradient as well that show clean.
So one of the questions that I had regarding this is, and you say that the depth on the plume varies. My question was, is this going to impact the excavation and the planned revisions to the DPW yard, where they're looking at a retention or detention pond over there? Will this affect their ability to put that in?
I don't foresee it being an effect on that, no. You're dealing with metals, and the concentrations that they're at, they pose no risk to direct contact. There are no direct contact criteria for groundwater. So there won't be any risk to putting in a stormwater retention pond.
I think it would be important for us to know what the depth is in those areas that we're going to have incursion and excavation, so we don't end up having potential to breach anything like that.
So in that area, especially to the south of the drain, depth to water, obviously you're getting at a lower elevation as you get closer to Yerke's drain. Yerke's drain at most times of the year is reflective of groundwater surface. So you have the groundwater table curving down to Yerke's drain. So as you get lower in elevation, getting closer to Yerke's drain, that water table is going to get shallower and shallower. So depending on your distance away from the drain, you could be 5, 10, 15 feet above the water table, depending on the elevation.
I mean, you can understand our concern. We have some practical considerations that if this influences how we can improve our site to address our own needs, that's going to be a problem for us.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
The one thing is that from an exposure pathway, which is really what you're talking about, right? This is a groundwater use ordinance, right? So you're talking about ingestion of the groundwater would be the prohibition. For like the installation of a stormwater retention pond, you're talking about direct contact, or that is not an exceedance. So from an exposure pathway standpoint, that's something that we would not be concerned with.
Okay. So, I mean, just because we go to some depth, it doesn't end up making it more volatile to be accepted by water and move somewhere else?
Correct.
Okay.
The thing that concerns me about this is, if you look at the dioxane plume in Ann Arbor, they didn't think it was a big deal either when it first started out. And now it's headed towards the Huron River, upstream of the water intake for the city. And they're monitoring it, and it keeps on moving. So you tell me that this isn't moving, this is isolated, and we're monitoring this thing on an annual basis, and the results are being fed back to verify that it's inert, it's not moving, it's not growing. And we're going to get
Correct,
that
yes.
information, and that's what the city's going to have, so that there isn't a surprise down the road on this.
And as I said, the city's well is upgradient.
I understand the well.
Right.
I'm just looking at this thing migrating. You tell me it's isolated, it's not going anywhere.
And that's part of the ordinance.
Yep.
That's part of the requirement of, so the state of Michigan, it is not uncommon to have groundwater use, limited groundwater use ordinances like this as part of Michigan Part 201, okay, which is the cleanup statute in Michigan. And when there are impacts to groundwater, in order to ensure that no one is drinking the water, it's not uncommon to put a groundwater use ordinance in. They've been passed all over the state. There's one in Milford, very close.
But to your point, I guess the issue of kind of ongoing monitoring from a long-term monitoring standpoint, that would be in place.
Yes,
right? So
yeah.
to making sure that plume is stable and it's not going somewhere where we didn't expect it, that long-term monitoring would be in place in order to assure that was occurring.
Councilmember Kurtzwell, go ahead.
I just had a couple of questions. Early in my legal career, I worked at an insurance defense firm, and it was on the environmental defense side, downtown Detroit. So I recall my specialty at that time was dealing with corrective action letters. Was there a corrective action ordered in here at all at any time?
Yes, so as I said, Michigan Seamless Tubes since 2004 has been operating under a corrective action consent order, or CACO, with the state of Michigan.
Okay, and have they complied with all the remediation in there? Because those consent orders have requirements as to what they have to do. I assume the monitoring is part of it.
Yes.
So have they complied with everything that's in that
Yes, and
consent?
if
If I may, John McCabe, I'm an environmental
Speak to the mic, please. Yeah.
I'm an environmental quality specialist with Eagle. I've been working on this site for 17, 18 years now.
So are you familiar with the remediation efforts?
Yes, very.
Could you speak to those, please?
Yes, I can. They're spelled out, or at least the big picture for them is spelled out in a schedule in the CACO. First, investigation. Second, review of possible treatment or remediation methodologies for the site. And thirdly, implementation of those methodologies. We are just beginning to get to the third stage now. The other portion of the schedule of the CACO was the financial obligations on MST's part to fund the remediation in a set amount every year. MST has been compliant, is in compliance with all the requirements for funding. They're consistent with the schedule. Investigation has taken a little longer than was initially conceived because, as you probably know from your experience, you start looking for things, you find certain things you didn't necessarily
Yeah, you didn't
expect.
anticipate, yeah.
But, you know, the contamination on the MST site has been bounded with real data that's been observed over years. So, you know, we have a good handle that what's there, where it's gone, where it's not going. The discussion of this ordinance is to deal with the metals exceedances on the south side of the site only. There's other corrective actions that they're going to have to propose.
Can I stop you right there?
You absolutely can.
That is exactly the point that I want to get to. I mean, I understand the CACO, I understand the initial stages that you have to go through, but you have now identified the plume, you've now identified the contamination. The next step is moving with that plan for, has any remediation been done at all? Is there no remediation going to be? Or was this just a corrective action to say to the plant, you are to stop using what you're using, we are to contain it, and we leave it at that? Is there any remediation at all?
Combination of both. There's some excavation been done. There's some excavation that's planned. There was some solidification and burial of sludge materials historically, where it was basically entombed. Part 201 allows local ordinances to prevent access to, or to prevent exposure to a contaminated media as a component of remediation, and that's what we're doing here today. MST is proposing this ordinance as their remediation effort for this part of the plume.
Okay, now you're getting down to the crux of everything.
Correct.
So remediation is the ordinance.
The ordinance is one portion of remediation.
That's important to understand. It's
Yes.
important for council to understand. So the remediation is a pie. There's going to be several pieces to this pie.
Correct.
One of which is the ordinance itself. But what are the physical remediations that are planned or being talked about with respect to removing, or can you not at this point, because the plume apparently is so far down in some of the area, you can't pull that dirt up and remediate? So,
Well, so the groundwater impacts, when MST began investigating the site, they identified off-site groundwater impacts. It's already moved past the site. So we have to do something about that.
Mhm.
So what we need to do is we need to ensure that no one is drinking that water. Now, there are no wells there, right? That area is served by municipal water. We can't, the state does not allow us to stop there. Even though no one is drinking that water, the state needs to ensure that it's enforceable, that someone just doesn't go and put a well in. And so that's why we need this ordinance, to ensure that nobody goes and puts a well in.
but I'm looking at remediation where you have removal of the contaminated, of what is contaminated, because the water may be contaminated, but the ground is also contaminated. Parts of that ground is also contaminated.
Not off-site. There's no off-site.
Okay, so where is contaminated ground? Is it on the property?
There's no off-site soil impacts, no.
So it's all water?
It's because of the historical operations at the facility, it impacted groundwater that migrated off-site. And so that's why we are asking for an ordinance for these 8 properties, because we want to ensure that no one puts a well on those 8 properties.
Okay, now, as to the plume, it's my understanding that plumes have more, and please correct me, because my information may not be correct, that plumes, on the average, have more of a tendency to increase rather than to retract. So if you have a plume that has these issues, the chances of that plume retracting is not as great as the chances of it increasing. So it may have stabilized, but the odds are that given the right conditions, and I'm going to ask you what those conditions are, what are the conditions that would cause that plume to enlarge? Would it be a rainy season? Would it be what?
So we've been investigating this site since 2004. And we have, as I said, we have defined what we call the nature, we know the materials in the groundwater, and the extent of the groundwater plume. The groundwater plume is stable. It's not increasing. We know where it is.
But it's not shrinking.
It's not shrinking, no. And that's why we need the ordinance for these areas.
You know, something that might be helpful to understand that isn't necessarily clear is generally when you have a situation where plumes are increasing, as you referred to, that's because there still is a source, a soil source of contamination. Several large soil sources at the site were remediated in the mid-1990s.
Okay. So there was soil contamination.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. There was a large,
Air site,
there was a large, well, 2 large sludge drying beds or sludge disposal areas. They were thought to be major sources of metals in groundwater. Those were solidified with cement kiln dust and, basically, turned into a block of rock, which does not leach. And that material is, essentially been entombed in the site. There was also some other material gathered up and placed into a clay-lined small landfill on the site, which has a series of small monitoring wells around it that is monitored 4 times a year to ensure that's not leaking. So those, based on the series of investigations, those seem to be the primary soil sources on site. And we're, based on the 15, 16 years of monitoring that we have, we're pretty confident that the groundwater contamination moving off-site it's as bad as it's ever going to get. It's not going to get worse. If it continues to move down gradient, it's going to be diluted as it does. So that defined clean perimeter that we have will stay a defined clean perimeter. And the whole goal is to keep, to have an enforceable proscription on drinking water wells on these 8 properties.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, you've been very helpful, yes.
And one thing to understand, the state has a model ordinance, so we'll be working with you on the language of the ordinance, but the ordinance requires the monitoring of those down gradient wells.
Yes.
To what we would call a sentinel well, which would tell us if something crazy happened and the plume were to ever move. That's a protection that is built into the ordinance so that we would know. I mean, we monitor all of our wells, as I said, so we also have that sentinel well, and that's a requirement of the state.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kennedy, go ahead.
Just, if you would, tell me a little bit about the trust fund. Tell me where it stands right now, what it's funded at, and what its purpose is.
So, as I said, when MST bought the property and the assets out of bankruptcy, they negotiated with the state a compliance schedule to investigate the site and a spending cap. And that was fundamental to MST being able to make the decision to purchase the property. So the first year, let's see what I got this year. The first year in 2004, I think they had to fund with $100,000. 2005, it was $125,000, and then it's $150,000 every year thereafter. As I said, they have put over $2 million into the trust fund. And how the process works is every year MST would fund the trust fund. MST then would submit work plans to the state. They would work with the state on what work needed to be addressed that year. And that's how I was saying that the state was prioritizing the work. Once the state was once they approved a work plan, once they thought it was acceptable, then MST would implement the work plan and then submit for reimbursement from the trust fund.
Okay, so that's been going on for 15 years.
Yes.
Okay, and the cost for doing that, I'm willing to bet, is probably increased in that 15 years. Yet there's no provision for an inflation rider on the amount that they're paying on an annual basis. It's capped at $150,000. So as the amount increases for the cost of work that they're doing and the invoices increase against the trust fund, the residual amount in that trust fund can potentially decrease, and you couldn't replenish it fast enough to accommodate all the work that's being done, because it's a flat rate from 15 years ago as it's established in this agreement. Is that right?
So each work plan every year would cost $150,000.
That's the max that they can charge.
That's the maximum that MST would be required to spend in any one year.
That's the max that they can spend, but it may or may not be adequate. I can hit $150,000, and after that, my work is done?
Each year, they're required to put in $150,000. They would develop work plans that would be $150,000. They would do that work. There were at least 2 years where MST and the state said, you know what, we want to do more work. So there were at least 2 years where MST actually funded more money into the trust fund so they could accomplish the work that they wanted to do in those years. Now that the site is moving to the monitoring phase, it is likely that they'll still have the $150,000 requirement. They may not need the whole $150,000.
What if they did? What if they needed more than that?
They're capped at $150,000 a year.
So it would limit the amount of work that they would perform based on the $150,000, because we haven't allowed for anything to increase just because the cost of doing those services increased over time.
So as I've said, that was an agreement with the state, and that was fundamental to MST's decision to purchase the property when that was negotiated.
I guess what I'm looking at is, what's the potential for revising that? That's why they bought it. But, the point is, I guess, things change over time. The costs are going up. It may limit what they actually need to do, because I only have to spend $150,000 worth of effort here, whether or not it's adequate to do.
So, as I've said, this is a long investigation, and you heard all the wells that we have. So we've been investigating the site for 15 years. We have investigated every area on the site that we had to investigate. So we know what's there. We're now moving into the monitoring phase of the whole life of this project. We know what those costs are going to be. We know which wells we're going to be monitoring. We know what work we're going to be doing forever. It's well within that amount. It's much lower than that amount.
How much lower? Just out of curiosity. Give some order of magnitude. I mean, how much extra margin do we have there, I guess is what I'm looking for.
We're starting to, when we move into the monitoring phase, it probably will be less than $100,000 a year. So right now, MST has continued to fund it, but we haven't actually used all of it over the last couple of years. So now there's over $300,000 in the fund.
Councilmember Kivel, go ahead.
That was actually one of the things I wanted to find out, was what was the balance. I mean, by 15 years at 150,000, you should have had $2.25 million in there.
Yes.
So you said that there's 300K in there now?
Well, it's not that it would be in there, because if you think about it, yes, they put 150,000 in. They work with the state to get an approved work plan for 150,000. They do the work. Once the state is, they've shown they've done the work, they submit their actual paid invoices to the state for reimbursement. So every year, if it worked out perfectly, 150 would go in and then 150 would come out.
Okay, so the state is the one that's got the calculator making sure that those numbers are correct. Okay. There's a couple of things. The idea that this area, for whatever reason, there's some climatic thing that influences the way this performs, and suddenly you start getting readings in that. Is there a way, because quite honestly, I don't think that we're going to have an objection to the idea of putting these no wells in this area. I mean, it doesn't make any sense not to go there. But at the same time, I don't want us to end up feeling as though we don't have any ability, if circumstances change, that we don't have any influence on reactivating some other plan to try to redress whatever the change might end up being. So is there a potential for a reopener of the language or something? You're not going to want to put wells in, but once we sign on the dotted line on this, we don't have a great deal of leverage to do much to influence the way this is being addressed.
Well, those are sort of two separate buckets, if you will. One is the ordinance, okay, that we are requesting. And the ordinance is to address the existing impacts that are there off-site. Okay, that's separate. As far as if there were ever changed conditions or future work, that's what Eagle's job.
Yeah.
And
we would essentially make a determination, if the ordinance was no longer protective, of the entirety of off-site contamination, that their corrective action is no longer satisfactory, and they would, they'd have to propose something new. They'd have to track any movement of groundwater contamination and determine what to do about it.
And that's actually part of my concern, is because the likely outcome of that will end up being that the plume has spread, the need for this restriction to be advanced beyond where its border will be during the course of this relief. So,
well, do remember we're going to be checking on that, on an annual basis, and groundwater moves relatively slowly. We're talking feet per year. And, at this site, We've got two geologists here who can give us a pretty good idea of exactly how many feet per year. And there will be this groundwater, the proposed groundwater ordinance includes a buffer zone as well. If contamination and exceedance of the drinking water criteria reaches any Sentinel well, you've got some time to figure out what to do about it, before it gets off or outside of the area of the ordinance. And, we would be doing that sort of thing. As with the current groundwater monitoring that's going on the site, periodically Eagle staff would be down to do what's called split sampling, where we, when the consultant samples groundwater, we sample as well and make sure that the results are in agreement. So DEQ oversight will continue with this long after the ordinance is in place. This is, as Ms. Sanford explained, once you're a RCRA facility, you're in that program forever, your liability goes on forever, and your oversight goes on forever.
Right, but they've already gained relief, because it didn't start until 2004. So most of the really heinous stuff that we're addressing now was already there that they don't hold responsibility for. So
Well, no, as John said, so the actions that caused the impacts were all conducted by MST's predecessor. When MST came in and bought the facility out of bankruptcy and restarted the facility, that allowed MST to generate money to address the impacts that were at the facility.
And it also allowed the state of Michigan to have a party that was going to conduct cleanup activities, right? Because without the entity that steps in, the site would have been orphaned and it would have been sat there. To your question as it relates to the liability itself, that liability, there's only, Ms. Sanford indicated earlier that there's kind of that Part 201 portion of it that you were able to get some type of liability step away. But that RCRA stuff, as John indicated, that is still their obligation, right? There's no getting away from, that liability.
Well, you've already spoken to the fact that most of it seems to be entombed where it's not really viable to move. So, I feel a little bit comforted by that. I guess I'm worried about, when you watch the news and they're talking about climate change and, so if we're awash in water that historically wouldn't end up being present here, suddenly it's a new game. So, obviously that's hopefully well beyond our lifetimes, but.
I just did want to indicate that this was not a case of filing pieces of paper to deal with contamination, that there was actual physical work and considerable amount of it done at the site from the mid-90s through the, there's some excavation work that was done under my tenure in the project as well.
Well, and our bigger concern is the practical one of, can we use our property the way we need to use it? So, yeah. Right.
Councilmember Kurtzwell, go ahead.
I want to go back to property 7 and property number 8. And it's my understanding that these two properties do not have any monitoring on them, any monitoring wells. Those would be the privately held properties?
That is correct.
That's correct.
Yep.
That bothers me a little bit. These are privately held properties. I think that these property owners are clearly entitled to know what's on their property, what's moving through their property. I think that if I look at this map, it appears that the drift of the plume is south. And so if it's moving onto property 7 and property 8, then it's probably under McMunn Street, and it's probably...
No, that's upgrading of the
Okay.
facility. McMunn is upgrading.
Okay. But would there be any movement of that plume at all
So,
from property 7 and property 8?
not the other way, no. Groundwater flows in one direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as I said, we've studied this site forever. the direction of groundwater flow is very well understood, okay? These two property owners, 7 and 8, they don't have wells. They can't. They're served by city water. So the purpose of the ordinance is just to ensure that they don't go out and say, geez, I want to go put a well in. And that's what the ordinance will do. The ordinance will prevent them from being able to put a well in.
So you have
So there will be no exposure.
So you have a private property owner who is going to be restricted in how they can use their property based on this ordinance.
So, yes, right now, these property owners do not have wells because you have city water. So, generally, when you have city water, you're not allowed to put in a drinking water well because the city would lose the revenue. Okay? But for the state, that is not sufficiently enforceable. They can't enforce that to make sure that a person does not go out and put a well on their property. So that's the purpose of the ordinance. And as I said, the state has a model ordinance so where they've developed to ensure that it is enforceable and has the proper protections.
And if I may add to that, not only the proper protections, but one of the requirements of the ordinance is that the state be notified prior to any changes in the ordinance or violations of the ordinance. So once again, we can exercise our oversight role.
Have these property owners been notified of the issue?
I know that we did a notice of migration that we were required to do. I'm not sure which property. I would have to look at.
Yeah, I'd have to double check on that.
Who was all notified. But because that was quite a long time ago.
Well, I don't know that it's proper for us to end up making a determination for a private landowner to determine whether or not what if they wanted to sue MST because you've devalued their property now? So
Well, they can. Under this ordinance, it's my understanding that there is no release from liability.
Correct. This ordinance,
Yeah.
If they had a cause of action, the ordinance does not affect any cause of action or private right of action that they would have against MST or anyone. The ordinance simply is to ensure that there are no unacceptable exposures. So that even though no one is drinking this water right now because there is municipal water, it's just to ensure that nobody does.
And it provides an enforcement mechanism, right?
Right,
It
a
provides
legal
enforcement
leg
for
to
the
use,
city,
yeah,
it provides enforcement for Eagle. It also provides a mechanism in which the Oakland County Health Department has notice of the ordinance in place. They'll put it into their, GIS system. So if somebody comes and asks for a well permit, it's flagged. So just some oversight as well as kind of the enforcement mechanism.
what if they surreptitiously put a well in? Who has the ability to impose themselves on these guys?
So the city or Eagle could actually enforce on that.
Okay.
Right. In the way that I believe their model ordinance is drafted, it's a misdemeanor, and
It's a violation of the ordinance.
Yeah.
So I guess the real point here is it's not just drinking water, it's also non-drinking water. If somebody sank a well just for irrigation, they want to water their lawn or their property, that's also included in the ordinance. They can't do that and disturb the plume, right?
Correct. Because I'm old enough, maybe you're not, but we used to drink out of hoses. And you don't want a kid drinking out of a hose.
I still do.
Mr. Mayor?
And
Mr. Willem, go ahead.
to speak to Mr. Kivel's concern earlier, too, there are exceptions for monitoring wells and wells used for dewatering during construction projects.
Oh, I see. Okay, you can punch a hole for those. Okay.
I want to say something.
I'd like to make sure there's a full and accurate discussion. There's also, in addition, it seems like the discussion has been concentrating on the metals. There's also another compound within the contamination, vinyl chloride. Can you address the vinyl chloride, what it is, how it acts differently or the same as metals, and how that is a factor?
So when I started my discussion, I talked about two different regulatory frameworks. So one is RCRA. And RCRA, as I said, that liability runs with the land. You can't ever get out of RCRA liability. As John mentioned, it's there forever. When MST, the current owner, purchased the property. They did the baseline environmental assessment under Michigan Part 201, and a purchaser can do a BEA, and if they identify any impacts that were on the property prior to purchase, they don't have liability for those areas. So there was an area of vinyl chloride identified south of the MST property that is covered by these, it's in these same areas. MST does not have liability for that. However, MST has elected to do what's called monitored natural attenuation, and MST, even though they're not required to, they're going to continue to monitor the vinyl chloride area and to document. Vinyl chloride is an organic material as opposed to a metal, so that will break down. So they're monitoring that breaking down process. As part of the investigation, MST determined actually that there are two plumes. One that MST is likely the source of, and another one that one of the properties south is likely the source. MST is not the source of that. But the important overriding point is that, and the vinyl chloride plume is much smaller, but it's covered by the same properties that are, the subject of the ordinance.
Thanks, Tim. Councilmember Richards, go ahead.
One thing I just want to bring up that you've spoken of, but it hasn't really concentrated on, all the water that's going west of the city limits of South Lyon doesn't go through Yerkes Drain, okay? In this area, we have ribbons of underground water sand that go underneath that property diagonally at depths of 12 to 24 feet. There's a second aquifer below the surface of Yerkes Drain, because I've dug, when it's been dry, I was a younger man, I've dug holes in the place, okay, and see what, and the water comes up, okay, because there's water going underneath the area you can see, okay, but it's very possible, okay, that in the second aquifer down below where the vinyl chloride or the molybdenum's not a major problem, okay, some other stuff maybe, okay. What's to stop, because these ribbons go up and down, they don't just all go straight like a pool cue heading west or anything, they go up and down and back and forth. What's to stop them from crossing over the line into Green Oak Township, Livingston County, popping up with no warning, okay, half a mile to a mile away, okay, in another area, and somebody runs a test, gee whiz, where'd this come from, you know, and we're going to look around, it must have come from South Lyon. Okay, that has happened in Brighton years ago, okay? I believe it was the Fond du Lac matter, okay? With the state's salt, road salt situation. Anyway, I'm just letting you know, and your geologists, your hydrogeologists all should know and be aware of the underground flow of water underneath the surface of what you see on the surface, okay? And obviously, some of these contaminants have gone under Yerkes Drain and didn't go into it, and they've come up on the other side, okay? And that's a factor that may play up in the future, liability-wise, okay? If this migrated, okay, further west, okay, and pops up in Livingston County. I'm just saying it's a possibility. And all this whole thing, in a manner of speaking, is designed to protect you, 80%, and only the people of South Lyon or the city as a body, say 20% or less. This whole thing protects you more than it does us and the citizens of this town. That's all I'm saying. Go ahead.
So, as I said, just to come back to this, MST has been investigating this site for over 15 years, so they've looked at everything. They haven't just looked at this one area. They've looked at the groundwater west in Livingston County. They've looked at everything. This was the only area that we needed a groundwater ordinance. This is the only area where constituents have migrated off the site above the drinking water criteria.
I have nothing to say.
Even into the wetlands to the west? Okay, thank you.
Certainly appreciate the information and the background information so that we'll be better informed when it comes time for the ordinance.
Well, thank you very much for all of your time.
Thank you, you've been very helpful.
Thank you.
With that, we will move on to the budget this evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Did anyone else have anything on the budget this evening? Okay. Now that everyone's back in their seats, we'll move on to the manager's report.
I want to update council, the audit and corrective action plan. Plant Moran will be making their audit presentation in late September, early October. This meeting will also be here they'll also be there to discuss a request for the approval of the OPEB corrective action plan, which has been discussed prior to council. I did want to update council regarding the request for information regarding the potential purchase of computers. Had discussions with the IT regarding laptops and tablets. There is a range from about $750 to $1,100 for purchase of tablets or HP ProBooks. We will need to determine or make a determination whether all council members will want to have them. And I do make a recommendation based upon that, but we may want to delay this discussion or potential purchase. And that's all I have. In case you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anyone have anything for Paul this evening? All right, thank you. At this time, we'll open the floor for public comment. Please remember to state your name and address, and just a friendly reminder, there is a 2-minute time limit. Okay, we will close public comment, and at this time, we'll move on to council comments. Councilmember Kennedy, go ahead and start us off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To start off tonight, I just want to mention that last Friday was our last concert in the park for the year. The band was great, turnout was terrific. It's always just a little sad to see summer come to a close as everyone wraps up their vacations for the summer and prepares for another school year. I just want to thank Bob Martin and Carol over here at City Hall for their help organizing and scheduling these events. I know the residents in our community certainly appreciate everything they've done to make these concerts happen every Friday. So on behalf of everyone who attends those concerts, thank you so much for all of your hard work. Next, I want to congratulate the Friends of the Salem South Lyon District Library for a very successful book sale. This year, the annual book sale raised over $2,500 for the library, which was about a 7% increase over last year. And they're not finished yet. They have a supplier who's picking up the remaining books, going to sell them, and a portion of those proceeds, in turn, will go to the Friends organization as well. So congratulations to the Friends organization for a job well done. On another subject, since our last meeting, I've had the opportunity to speak to a large number of residents about a number of issues. And one of the recurring themes from those discussions is the need for the city to better communicate with the residents regarding what is happening in the city. As an example, two of the larger issues being addressed in this year's budget deals with the city's water and wastewater systems. The ground storage tank by the water plant in McCaddy Park is leaking. As part of this year's budget efforts, the effort is underway to build a second storage tank in that vicinity so the water can be offloaded from the primary tank and then the tank can be relined without interrupting the water supply to the residents. The second major issue that's being addressed this year will be the installation of a secondary wastewater line underneath the railroad tracks near Pontiac Trail. As many of you are aware, there have been several repairs in recent years to the existing line near the entrance to the Water Edge apartment. Once the new line is installed, it will allow the existing line to be properly repaired and or replaced so the residents on the north end of town can be assured that when they flush the toilets, the wastewater is headed to the treatment plant. Finally, a large number of folks want to know why we can't seem to pave Pontiac Trail between 9 Mile and 11 Mile. At the present time, there are drainage issues with the infrastructure beneath the road in that area that need to be addressed. Those issues and others need to be repaired before paving the road so that the newly paved road isn't torn up a year or two later to address those problems. The city will be working with the Road Commission of Oakland County to determine the best approach for addressing the utility concerns in that area and its subsequent impact on the surrounding areas within the city. Without raising taxes, the city needs to address its repair issues in a logical sequence based on the priority of the repair and its impact on the residents. So for this year, the water and wastewater issues are being addressed, and the Pontiac Trail issue will be addressed in the future. And finally, I want to remind everyone that this Wednesday is the Lake Street Cruise-In once again. So plan to bring the family downtown to downtown South Lyon to see some great classic cars, visit with your neighbors, and enjoy dinner. It starts at 6:30 in the evening. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Kennedy. Councilmember Richards?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just like to say congratulations to Mr. Cottengim on his successful completion of his feast event he had last Saturday. I was impressed with his agenda that he put together on everything that's involved, and including the parking that he went to. He must have had monitors. I rode through it all, and he had our overflow lot neatly done, and plus he had cars parked in a tube mill, and they were all in little rows, and they must have been done with a monitor watching and directing people. They weren't there when I went through, but just the same, I was impressed. Okay, it took a lot of organization to pull that thing off, and he does a lot of good for the city, even though he irritates the Historical Society sometimes, and I'm part of it. I have to say Mr. Cottengim deserves a great deal of credit for his efforts and his contribution to everything that he donates the money for and bringing business into the town. Also, I'd like to say something about the cemetery. I was up there and took a look at the progress of the repair of gravestones and such, and I walked it, okay, with my cane, and all the ones that were damaged this time around seem to have been repaired to me. There's other stones in there that are still broken up and knocked around, but they appear to be from years ago, and some of it's just deterioration of the marble caused by acidic action, okay? They would need to be repaired by a professional. So I'm just saying there's other stones that aren't intact up there, but the damage, immediate damage that was caused by vandalism, all appears to be corrected to me. And thirdly, I'd like to say thank you to Consumers Power and your subcontractors, who evidently you kept after, and they come back to South Lyon this last weekend and fixed our sidewalks in the vicinity of Dorothy Street and the Methodist Church, across in front of the Catholic Church. And it's wonderful. The pavement, the sidewalk paving's done. Plus they've brought in their own topsoil and reseeded and put down ribbons or straw. I've never seen that before, but it's evidently straw that's made into mats. Wheat straw, it looks like to me. And to give the seedlings a chance to sprout up in the warmer weather, direct sunlight and such, you know. And evidently they watered them. Anyway, they've completed their part of the job, okay? And I'm very impressed with it, and I think Ron Brock said they'd get to it eventually. And it looks nice. We ought to be happy about it, really. Well, that's all I want to say tonight. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Richards. Councilmember Walton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To piggyback on what you had to say about Witch's Hat and their Fury for a feast event, they did raise over $15,000 for donation and gathered in 2 pallets of food, which is just phenomenal of our community. It just goes to speak more volumes of how much we care about each other. But if you are looking to maybe add in a little furry friend, that Furry Friends Rescue has 40 outdoor cats that they are looking to rehome as soon as possible. So if you need a good mouser for your pole barn, you got a garage you can put a corner in, they're the ones to go to. The other thing I want to bring up is the chalk wall damage. I know there was some graffiti done on it this past week, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If you give these people a place to go, they will not damage what you have. So I would love to see this city give them a section of wall that they can graffiti on. It might not be our art, but it is their art, so let's respect that and give them somewhere to go, somewhere to work on that, and to leave the chalk wall alone. And if you're going to get out and do something, hit up the Recreation Authority. This is a phenomenal catalog. I took a breeze through it this week, and there is all kinds of great things. So all ages, get out there and have some fun. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Walton. Councilmember Kurtzwell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to address the two comments that were made earlier this evening by two individuals that are running for city council. There's a little bit of disagreement with some of the positions they were taking. First of all, this council has tremendous focus, and there's tremendous unity, whether you want to see it or not. When you sit on council, you have a choice. You can either rubber stamp and just do what you're supposed to do, is vote whatever, or you can do your homework. You can come in here, be well researched, ask the questions, debate. That is what we do in a democracy. We do not sit up here and allow a king to rule the roost. We have 6 individuals up here with 6 different opinions, and everybody is going to have a different point of view, but that doesn't mean that people don't like one another. It just means that their ideological differences that sit on this council bring a different flavor to the table, to the dinner. That's a democracy. And I can't tell you the people that are offended by rubber stamping. They want people to come up here that are going to advocate, that are going to present other points of view, that are going to discuss, that are going to challenge. That is what they want. They do not want this group that comes up here and decides how everyone's going to vote at the end of the day. So I have to disagree a little bit that there is focus up here. And that focus is making sure that we explore all the avenues. The avenues that I explore are different than what Councilman Kivel explores or Councilman Kennedy explores. We each have our issues, but that doesn't mean that we don't walk out of here with a good decision that is being made for the city. I sometimes don't always vote the same way they vote, but that doesn't mean that we're not unified and we're not focused. It means democracy is working very well on this council, and I think that's what the public truly appreciates, is that there are these diverse points of view. Next, I think also in terms of focus, I think that you have to look at the progress that this council has made over the past 4 years. And for the new entrants that are coming into the political arena, I think you need to really do your homework. Because here's some of the progress that this council has made. It's a fairly historic council. We have rehabbed and dealt with retirement here in the city, which was absolutely necessary for the city to do. I don't know if any of the candidates tonight are aware of that, but the city of South Lyon was one of the last cities to make any kind of changes in their retirement plans. It was this council that did it. This council. This council was also responsible for making sure that we hired a brand new city manager. He has done a phenomenal job. This council worked very well at hiring somebody who had top credentials to come in here and straighten out a mess that the city was in. Doesn't matter how it got here. Bottom line is they were there. And this city manager has come in and just straightened things out. He's got a lot of things he needs to take care of. We have a new chief of police, phenomenal chief of police. There isn't a person I haven't spoken to over the past year and a half that said that change, we wish it had happened years ago. Because you are that good. Your relationship in the community is that good. The subdivisions love you. They love the work that you're doing. And that feedback is coming back. A new head of DPW. We actually had a situation over there in DPW where we had an open fire, an open furnace for years. And that finally got fixed. Not under your regime. But that's how bad things were, an open fire on a furnace, hanging overhead with those men. This council has been very, 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 very focused. Our budget process is moving forward with future planning. Hopefully next year we'll have a capital improvement plan. Hope the new council, people that are looking to be on city council, hope you understand what a capital improvement plan is. We have a very active cultural arts commission. We didn't have that 5 years ago. We have it now with this council. This council. We also are going to be getting a fence around the water tower. I've been asking for 20 years to get a fence around that water tower, just for security reasons. We're finally going to be getting it. Tonight you heard a discussion about wheelchair coming into our park, providing for diversity for children that have other issues. This council is doing it. So when you come and say that this council may not be focused or there may not be unity, I don't know what movie you're watching. Because you got to get out of the noise, out of the gossip. And you got to look at what this council has done. It's been pretty historic. When the hotel burned down, over $2 million was invested in that new hotel. We could have lost it. But this city pulled together, and the hotel stayed. We have a new business coming in town that I think is going to be investing over $1.2 million. By the time another business gets done investing, I think that's going to be another $500,000. This did not happen 5 years ago. It's happening with this council. Sure, we disagree. But there isn't a family out there that doesn't disagree. That's the way it is. But at the end of the day, you move forward, and this city is absolutely going places. There's no doubt in my mind. Next, as to the comment about campaign finance violations, that's not negativity. That's called enforcement of the campaign finance laws. The only person who's been negative tonight that I have heard has been a candidate that came up to the microphone. I've been out there campaigning for almost a year, and I am hearing nothing about this is an incredible council. These are incredible things that are happening to our city that we never, ever thought would happen. Nobody ever thought the downtown would be improved. Nobody. There isn't one person that thinks that. It's very positive. All I'm hearing is incredibly positive things. And campaign finance is not a negative thing. It's called enforcement of the laws that are on the book. And if you think the laws only apply to me or another candidate and not to you, then maybe council isn't where you should be. Because maybe you want a different set of rules that apply to you and not to the rest of us. The laws are there to be applied equally. I comply with campaign finance. I make sure that my signs have this thing out there, and I comply. But that doesn't mean that I'm negative. I mean, that's a narrative that really shouldn't be out there. And anybody who works on my campaign, everything that I've heard from everybody, has said that this is probably the most positive campaign season they've ever seen. I'm telling you, I haven't heard one complaint. And anybody who works on my campaign is told you do not diss another candidate, you don't talk negative, and that includes Facebook. You stay off of that doggone sewer. I'm sorry, but that's how I feel. Because nothing but negativity is out there on that Facebook. You don't ever discount anybody, because the people that are running for city council, they have an absolute right to run on policy and what they would do different for the city than what we have already done. Give them their opportunity to stand on their policy and leave the personalities out of it. No one on my campaign is permitted to personally attack any candidate that's out there running, whether it's for mayor or for city council. Next, I'd like to say that I had an opportunity to observe a joint training session with the South Lyon Police Department and the Fire Department. It was quite impressive on how these professionals train and prepare to preserve and protect the public. The training session related to an active shooter situation. So, Chief Sovic, I would like to thank you and our first responders for their incredible courage, their bravery, and clearly your dedication to public safety. It was very, very informative. Next, I would like to bring to the attention that Pumpkin Fest is actually going to have a pumpkin pie baking contest, and I am going to include the form along with the minutes to tonight's meeting, so everybody is aware of it. I am not known as a baker. so I don't think you have to worry about me presenting anything, but this is going to be fabulous, and this is being sponsored by the Ashka Salon. And I want to start early, as I always do with our sponsors. I want to thank Vibe Credit Union for being I think they're a Title I sponsor for Pumpkin Fest this year. Please make sure that we support and thank Vibe Credit Union for their incredible support. Next, I would like to address a remark that was made at the last public meeting regarding an individual who was concerned about summer taxes at Colonial Acres. Most of the seniors were well aware that the budget that was approved in May did include an increase in property taxes. So I did not vote for that budget, but I'm not going to sit here and talk about anybody who did vote for the budget. I think people vote why they vote, and they don't need to be brought up because they had a different opinion. So you can go to the minutes and see who voted for the budget. I did not. Next, I would like to thank all the sponsors who helped St. Joseph's Church picnic on August 18th. It was a tremendous success. I was there. There were almost 1,000 people that attended the event. Please make sure that you thank all the sponsors. Very, 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 very well attended. Next, on a very important issue, I think people know that I have a very anti-drug message. And I was one of the first to come out and speak against vaping. And I still believe that the vaping center over on Pontiac Trail, if there was a way to close it, I would love to have it closed, but it's not meant to be. But we do have a population here that is struggling with drug addiction. And I do want to make an announcement that Dr. Ray is coming. He is a very well-known national speaker. He's a clinical psychologist. He's an author and a national speaker, and he is heard on over 440 stations in Sirius XM. He's the father of 10 adopted children, some of which have special needs. His seminar is going to be held on, it's going to be a lecture. It's going to be on Saturday, September 14th at 7 o'clock at St. Joseph's Catholic Church. It is being open to everyone in the community. And the topic of Dr. Ray's talk is going to be on parenting. I would advise anybody and everybody to attend that lecture. It is about parenting in the age of drugs. It's about parenting in the age of Facebook. It's about parenting and how to be a confident parent. They're expecting close to 1,000 people at this event. I would encourage everyone to go. I know I'm going. I myself don't have children. But when you go to events like this that are talking about life issues, you will be able to walk away with something that is important in your life. I have friends that have children that have emotional disabilities, and he has children with emotional disabilities, and I'm sure that his insight will be very, very helpful on how parents and friends of parents can work with these children. The lecture will be about an hour with a question and answer period about 45 minutes. So for parents out there, I would advise, these are dangerous times. We have a beautiful community, great community, very, very supportive community. Well, let's take advantage of this opportunity. It only comes around once in a while. Like I said, he's a national speaker with high credentials. So good night, everyone. Have an incredible Labor Day. Be safe, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kurtzwell. Councilmember Kivel?
I hope everybody has enjoyed National Dog Day. I know that our dog and I enjoyed walking in the rain after I got home from work. So it was nice and a soft rain, so the cleanup was a little bit more problematic. But I'd also like to congratulate the Witches Hat Brewery for their Saturday's successful event. Fury of the Feast was the 7th annual food drive and fundraiser held at the brewing company, providing help to Gleaners Community Food Bank and Blessings in a Backpack. I'm sure they're quite happy to have a relationship with the brewery. There's a lot of good bands performing, as well as people enjoying the great beverages and Slow's to-go barbecue. That was a very nice evening, and we had the benefit of some really terrific weather too. So I'd like to give thanks to Carly Morris. She was a cadet here, and I want to thank her for her service to South Lyon and wish her all the best in her endeavors. She's going to U of M's Public Safety Department, so congratulations to her. So I'm interested to know from people in the public, I'm interested to know if there are residents having a difficult time with getting their landscaping or sprinkler systems restored after Comcast had come through to install their infrastructure. They've wired the city with their cable, and I know some people that have had an issue with getting some things attended to. If anybody has some long-term problems and they're not seeing satisfaction, please reach out to me. My email address is gkibble@southlyonmichigan.org. I want to get a sense of whether it's an issue or if there's just a couple of isolated incidents that are taking place. So if anybody could contact me with the problem, I'd like to get a gauge on this. Okay, so I wanted to restate Mary's points for voters to get informed about the candidates running for city council in November. There's going to be meet and greet candidate events, and you can attend those, take advantage of watching videos of city council meetings that can be found on South Lyon, Michigan, or southlyonmi.org, just to get a sense of the dynamics that typically have taken place in our meetings. You can see who works together. Who provides constructive input, who seems to be have a strong understanding of the subject matter being discussed, or perhaps don't have much to offer. So I think that'll be very useful. And finally, I'd like to repeat Mary's message of people getting engaged and submitting an application for one of our boards or commissions. The city relies on these people for Cable Commission, Cultural Arts Commission, Historical Commission, Parks and Rec Commission, Planning Commission, Housing Commission, Board of Ethics, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. All of them are in need of assistance. So help your community out, reach out, submit an application, and step into the fore. So everyone it can't be the same 12 people that do everything. We need people to step up and take responsibility for what's going on in your community, have an influence on that. Their work and advisory roles are very valuable and needed, and help move the city in a constructive direction. So I've said my piece. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, Councilmember Kivel. Chief Sovic, I'm sorry, I skipped over you. Did you have anything for this evening?
Just wanted to piggyback on what Councilman Kivel said about Carly Morris. She's been with us since December of 2017. She's taken a position with the University of Michigan Department of Public Safety and Security. Today is her last day. I just wanted to thank her publicly for her service. She has been an awesome cadet for us, and I just wanted to thank her publicly.
I wish I would have touched base with you, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
That was yours to give up.
I just have a couple brief things. Just a reminder for everyone that school's kicking back off next week on Tuesday. So if you see an uptick in traffic, that'll be because the buses are back out there and we're back to school. I hope everyone has a great Labor Day. And what comes along with Labor Day is, of course, the kickoff of high school football season. And the teams here in South Lyon had a great performance last year. Both teams making the playoffs. It sounds like both teams could be strong again. And so, if you get a chance, Friday Night Lights is still alive and kicking here in the city of South Lyon, and we got two really great programs to support. So I'd like to remind you guys to go ahead and do that. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Tim Wilhelm, as we do have a little bit more work to do tonight, and possibility of going into closed session.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So it looks like it is time for a performance review of your city manager. You're allowed to do that under the Open Meeting Act, Section 8A. So the cited references on the agenda are incorrect. But that allows you to discuss personnel evaluation. And I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that's a majority vote.
Okay. Yeah. And that is a roll call vote?
Roll call is required.
All right. Lisa?
And that, by the way, that is at the city manager's request. So that is only at the request of the employer personnel that is the subject of the discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion.
Yep, discussion. Councilmember Kurtzwell.
No, I was going to make the motion.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, I move that council move into a closed session pursuant to the section permitted in the Open Meetings Act in order to conduct a performance evaluation which is personnel related with respect to the city manager. The closed meeting is at the request of the city manager.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll go over to Lisa for a roll call vote.
Kennedy?
Yes.
Kibble?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Walton?
Yes.
Kurzweil?
Yes.
Mayor Polka?
Yes.
Okay, need the microphones off.
Mayor, I just want to make one motion that, or make one note that the council will be coming back, will not be coming back into session after at the end of this.
Well, we may.
Just what, you may decide to do that, but for anybody waiting, I mean, you, I think you need to discuss that whether you want to or not.
Well, you don't know until you have the meeting.
Yeah. If anyone needs a couple minutes before you...
Yes, please. Please.
Yeah, just say that. Thanks.